is there like a specific game that was?
I know like Super Metroid was in there,
Yeah.
Donkey Kong Country was in there, but you know, and part of it too is it was like, you know, it was right around the time CDs were coming out, and so like I wanted a CD player, and then the CD player that my mom got me, you know, it also had the audio in, so then I could get stereo sound, and it had a tape deck, so I could like record like game soundtracks. So I was like recording like Secret of Mana and Mega Man X and that kind of stuff.
Do you remember what your first? What was the first game that you actually recorded?
The first that I actually tried.
Which broke the seal.
Yeah, exactly. Like, what was the one where you sat down and it's like, I have to have this. I have to put this to tape.
Yeah, I don't know which one the first one was. I know I did some Final Fantasy VI opera scenes and the ending. I actually recorded those to VHS. And brought them to my English teacher because we were studying opera and like, you got to watch this.
Oh yeah, completely.
That's awesome.
That's still one of the best sequences of any Final Fantasy is where you got to go through the opera scene. You have to remember the lines as you're going through.
I love that we have these experiences that at the time they just seem like, you know, diversion basically, and then they end up being like this fundamental like cultural backbone, you know, core part of who we are. For me, the LucasArts and the Sierra Adventure games were those. Like I'll you know, my memories with like Maniac Mansion and Monkey Island and then the subsequent, you know, later, like Grim Fandango is to me the height of games. And yeah, musically, those I distinctly remember one of the first games I went to figure out how to play by ear on the piano was the theme to Monkey Island.
Nice.
Which was like, what was that, 91 or something like that. It was pretty far back. So like I said, these things were always gonna collide one way or the other. Well, yeah, because now everybody's in their 30s and 40s and remembering the good old days of their youth and wanting to recreate it, and so you see that aesthetically across the board. I mean, look at a game like Fez, where it's a giant love letter to the way games were made back then, but obviously with wonderful contemporary twists that they could never have actually done then.
Yeah, but I feel like it's, you know, like there was a point maybe 4 or 5 years ago, like that was all just a nostalgia trip, and now I feel like we've kind of graduated beyond that. So it's like if people want to make a game in a certain style, like just do it.
Oh, absolutely. No, for sure. And yeah, I think a lot of, because there's always the danger that that's a gimmick, right? And that it's not actually kind of an authentic statement, and that it's just reactionary to feelings of nostalgia and trying to recapture. Like, to me, that's always kind of a weird psychological thing where it's like, if I make something that's a big love letter to this thing I'm nostalgic for, maybe I actually made the thing. But yeah, you're right. I think you're probably right. We gone beyond. I mean, like Super Hexagon actually is a perfect example, I think, where I didn't play that game and feel nostalgic to games of old. I was just sitting there going, fuck, and struggling to play it. And Chipsel's music, to me, is just great music. It's not a tip of the hat to the 8-bit era. It's 8-bit 21st century music, which is awesome. I do remember every now and again, and this was like 0.01%, but I did get some, like I remember the indie cred of that game company was constantly called into question because they had to deal with Sony.
Sony, of course.
And because, you know, and we recorded an actual orchestra for Journey, and people were like, I don't think indies do live orchestras. And I'm like, so you'd rather I do a cheap fake attempt to sound like a real orchestra? Like if I'm doing electronic music, that's its own thing. It sounds right. It sounds like what it is. Like there's no like better produced version of Chipsel's music, for example. Like she does it exactly how it's supposed to be. That's its natural environment. But if I'm writing for strings and it's supposed to be something expressive like Journey, I'm like, well, we kind of need to do real strings. And I did, again, I don't want to overstate it because it was very few people, but there were a few people that were like, you know, I don't know, I was kind of hoping for kind of an indie experience and I heard a real orchestra and that's kind of like, and I'm like, really?
That's true with just about anything.
Yeah, but that's the closest I can think of to there being like sort of those taboo things, you know? And if I'm like, if that's the case, then Banner Saga is totally screwed because we produced far more elaborately on this one than on Journey. It's like, I submit myself to your judgment. Like on a game
Right.
like Banner Saga, do you go in saying like this music better be good, or do you go in just to play a game and
Yeah, I mean, I think I usually, it's weird because I definitely have times where I'm more intentional about it. I think most of the time I just go in and start playing the game, and then things, sometimes things will pop out of me, like the sea shanties in Assassin's Creed.
Right.
sure,
I
yeah,
did not see that coming. This is awesome.
right.
And then other times, I mean, like what I played Max Payne 3.
Mm-hmm.
It did not have a good reputation around the office. There were a lot of people that said it's a pass, whatever. But I played that game because of the music. Because I had
Right.
already, had to, I wanted to consider it for, like when we do our end of the year awards and all that stuff. So like I'd gotten that soundtrack and listened to that soundtrack, and then it's like I want to hear how this works. I want to hear how it flows in the game, because like a lot of times that can be really different.
Oh yeah.
Preaching
to the choir
like,
there.
Even like
Right.
when you did like Monaco, like as as simple or whatever as people want to say that is, just that tension rise when you get spotted.
Yeah.
Oh, the
That
music
makes
for
a
that.
huge difference than just
The
listening
chase
to
music.
it on an album.
That's very wacky.
Quoi? Mais je vais te tuer!
I have to say, like, good music, like I enjoy it in, it sort of like follows the action, so on and so forth. But great music, like there were a couple of times during last year that I heard Risk of Rain, I think had some amazing soundtrack to it, and I loved it. But the problem was I couldn't get past like the first couple of levels, so I would hear the same thing over and over again. But there's another game, like I feel like good music, like really great music, can just punctuate the right emotions when you're dealing with a game where you want to like pull out like something a little bit extra. Or you want to hit something really hard. I'm actually one of my favorite games from last year that just got into the Independent Game Festival. The Yaw. It doesn't have. It has like a little bit of music, but it's that last song.
Yeah.
So in the game, you have 6 weeks in order to sort of prepare the city for like an attack. Like there's going to be a disaster, everyone is going to be just washed out, and it's like you have 6 weeks to prepare. And once that happens and once it hits, there's the song that plays.
Yeah,
like at the
it's
very
very-
end.
it's very touching.
And it hits you, and it's almost like a punch in the gut.
Yeah,
whenever you hear it, because you feel the desolation, you feel like sort of the loneliness, you feel sort of like the outcry that you were not good enough to save these people. And every time it plays, it's just like, oh my God, what could I have done better? What if I could go back again
Totally
and
agree.
replay the whole thing? What could I do? And it's because of that song. It's not because the game cuts to like whatever. I mean, it's all told in sort of like stills and text, but it's because of that song that really just pushes that emotional sort of note for you.
It does beg the question, though, that I'm curious your take on. Some people say the best music is the one that you don't notice.
Right.
You just have this amazingly immersive, engrossing experience. And other people say the best is the one that, like, you can hardly wait to
It's
buy the
gonna stand
soundtrack
out.
because
Oh, yeah, completely.
it's part of the. And I'm curious because I think about this a lot because obviously
I'm
sort of-
not in the don't notice camp, really. I mean, I honestly, like, if I go back and I listen through a soundtrack and I can't pick out like what any of those
Yeah.
moments are,
Right.
I feel like somehow it's kind of lost it. It's like it's gotten some kind of disconnect
Right.
from the story if it's not reminding me of where I was at. That's one of the like harder decisions for me. Like a couple years ago, like I really love like the Infamous soundtracks,
right.
and I was just listening to them over and over and over again. But I was like, I don't know what any of this actually goes to. I just like this music.
Well, I'm
So-
on Tobin,
No, I have to say I'm probably the same way. I think Swords and Sorcery, the whole soundtrack, I can tell you exactly which beat of the song, what I'm doing in that game. I can tell you exactly at what note I hit the bridge coming back.
Yeah.
Because it's so profound and it's so moving and it has such an effect on you because of that.
It's so interesting, because to me, there's also like, I really love subtlety is the thing.
Right.
Like I remember back in the day when Fear came out, you wouldn't remember. I think the experience that you're talking about, you wouldn't, if you went back and listened to like an album, you wouldn't be able to say, oh, this is that sequence or whatever. But God, it's so unnerving and effective in context that it's one of those like, because as a composer, you have to make these decisions. Like, do I kind of get a little bit boisterous here, knowing that people will probably notice, or do I try to play around the edges?
Well,
I don't have the answer.
I think it kind of just goes back to what you're saying before. It's like you're trying. I think it's like you have to identify and find that right voice for that game.
True.
Because like, I don't know, like. Like I said, I love that Infamous music, and it really, like a lot of the cool experimental stuff they did speaks to being in the city and all of the stuff going on. So it doesn't mean that they did a bad job or anything. So it is probably one of those things that's very individual to each game.
Yeah. If you played Skyrim, even a normal number of hours, you've probably heard that music more than your favorite band of all time. I mean, have you really listened to the Beatles more than 100 hours or even 50 hours?
Right.
Very few people listen to one thing that much.